took a bit longer than expected to get my hands on the remarkable Paper Pro, but now it's finally here. So let's unbox it, turn it on for the first time and see what all the fuss about this new color ink note-taking tablet is all about while I'm working on my full in-depth review. Like and subscribe to not miss that, and also comparisons to other tablets I've already lined up as well. Luckily everything was still in the package, even though it arrived almost half open. I got the remarkable Paper Pro, the Marker Plus and the black leather folio, all of which set me back an absurd 850 euros. Which brings me directly to the incredibly expensive 200 euros leather folio, which, to be fair, looks and feels nice, has clean cut edges and a cutout for the strap on the back. It has a pretty noticeable chemical smell out of the box though, but I expect that to fade over time. The Marker Plus is the premium pen option with an eraser on top and a heavier weight, offering a similar feel to the remarkable 2's Marker Plus. The spare pen tips come in a small box with a satisfying tray mechanism for opening and closing. Not that it really matters for everyday use, but someone definitely put in a lot of time and effort into designing this. The pen no longer uses Wacom technology, but instead uses the USI 2.0 standard. This means you can use the Paper Pro with other compatible pens, which I'll cover in a moment. Inside the last box, we finally have the tablet. A flat brown-ish USB-C to USB-C cable and a bit of paper wrap with the quick start guide. Taking the tablet out of its paper wrap immediately gives off a premium feel. The aluminum body feels much better than the Remarkable 2. Not that the Remarkable 2 is bad, but this one is definitely more like an iPad Pro than any other e-ink tablet. Also because of the flat edges, which gives it a boxier feel than most other e-ink tablets. The stylus notebook pages on the frame are a nice touch as well. The aluminum has this slight rose tint to it, so it's not exactly gray, which you can see a bit better when putting an iPad Air in space gray next to it. Just like the Remarkable 2, the pen attaches magnetically to the side of the device, but the connection feels even stronger. The tablet weighs 525 grams, which is not especially lightweight, but it doesn't actually feel heavy. With its 11.8-inch display, the tablet is unsurprisingly noticeably larger than other tablets in the 10.3-inch segment. And I guess that helps with the weight distribution and perceived weight a bit. If that's actually an issue during normal day-to-day use, we'll have to see. There are again these 4 rubber feet on the back side, though this time they aren't as tiny but really massive. They should offer more stability on the desk and also make them more robust. Here you can see how the strap sits in the cutout on the back of the folio, which helps getting it out of the way when fully opening the front cover. Okay, let's turn it on and quickly set it up before trying out a couple of things. So in this step during the setup process, Remarkable points out the screen refresh specifically so anybody who hasn't used ink before knows this isn't actually a defect but by design. But also because the color ink technology used here, Ink Gallery 3, requires more flickering than black and white ink. And that first boot up already has a few nice color accents, and what I can immediately tell from that is that the color yellow seems to be much more pronounced than it was with the Big Migueli, which is the only other Ink Gallery 3 device at this point. But that was only available in very small numbers and had a couple of issues. Check out my full review, linked in the description below if you want to learn more. After connecting to Wi-Fi, the Remarkable Paper Pro downloads and installs its first firmware update. Though after the reboot, for some reason it wanted to do it again, which looks like it was a glitch, because clicking the button again allowed me to continue with the setup. Pairing it with my existing Remarkable account through my phone was super easy, barely an inconvenience. After that, you can set up a 6-digit passcode, choose your writing hand, and that finally lands us on the home screen, which at this point synced most of the things from my account, which is a nice touch because I didn't have to wait to use it. Interestingly, it boots up with the Frontlight at full brightness, though as you can see, it's not especially bright. Barely noticeable in a well-lit environment actually, which is a bit of a bummer. So let's start writing, and this is unsurprisingly a very nice writing experience when it comes to pen latency. The first thing I noticed is how much quicker the ink particles fill into a line. With the Remarkable 2 and other ink color screens, there is this very subtle fade-in effect when drawing a line, which is noticeably quicker here. If that actually translates to 12 milliseconds of latency, Remarkable is promising, I have to test in my full review. But right now, I'd say independent of that claim, this definitely feels a bit more responsive than other ink tablets I've used. The Remarkable Paper Pro's rough surface texture feels noticeably different from the Remarkable 2, but more than the feeling itself, it sounds very different, and that's actually something I can already tell at this point that I'm not a big fan of. The pen tip feels harder than typical Wacom nibs, which might help with durability, but it creates a sound that's a bit too loud for my taste. Also, touching down the pen feels more like using an Apple Pencil on an iPad. Not exactly the same, but definitely closer to that than before. Oh, and about the USI 2.0 support I mentioned, the styluses from the Amazon Fire Max 11 and TCL Next Paper 11 I've here as well work on the Remarkable Paper Pro. Somewhat at least. Because tilting detection is messed up with those, as the tablet notices the tilt, but doesn't switch back. It's a shame because these pen nibs actually feel a lot more like Wacom without the tapping sound when touching the screen. But I'll check this out in a full review in more detail. Let's quickly talk about the Ink Gallery 3 screen before wrapping the first impressions video up before it gets too long already. I called the Remarkable Paper Pro a game changer after the announcement, because it's the first mainstream product to feature Ink Gallery 3 technology, and that's a huge step for ink and e-paper. There are cyan, magenta, yellow and white particles in here to produce up to 20,000 colors, which is why I like to call this tech real or true color ink, in contrast to Inkalator 3 displays, which use an RGB filter on top of a black and white ink screen. But Gallery 3 is not without compromise. Looking at the screen, the first thing you definitely notice is how somewhat surprisingly dark it is. Not as dark as Inkalator 3 screens, like the one on the Booksnote Air 3C or Pocketbook Inkpad EO, but definitely not as bright as black and white ink color screens of the Remarkable 2 or Booksco 10.3. So while this is a leap forward in how colors are generated, it's not the same bright background we've seen ink evolve into these past few years. It's a bit like turning back the clock, because looking at it side by side with the very first Kindle or the first Kindle DX, these actually look very similar. I think we often forget how much better ink has gotten over the years. So Ink Gallery 3 in the Remarkable Paper Pro is the first generation of this technology that's ready for the end consumer market, but it won't be the last iteration of it. And that is what I meant with it being a game changer. It opened the door for true color ink to be adopted, and with wider adoption, we'll see more improvements over time, same as we saw with black and white ink. But back to the Remarkable Paper Pro. Besides the darkness of the screen, there's a slight yellowish tint to it, but I'd say it's not especially noticeable on its own, and more like something you only notice side by side with other devices. We've already seen how the pen works with black lines. Now let's check out the color options. And with those, we get this interesting fade-in effect, which is needed because Ink Gallery 3 is still slower than Inkcolor. The way this tech generates black is by mixing all colored ink particles together. So black is not as deep as on a Kindle Scribe, for example, but instead has this slight bluish tint to it. When drawing a line, mixing the colored particles together is faster than separating one color, which is why the line is black at first and then the color fades in. After that, there's another refresh to finalize the rendering. I'll have to do a bit more testing to see how it feels using this over time. Personally, I don't mind it right now, but I can see that it might feel odd or even mildly distracting to some. The colors themselves actually look very nice, still muted, which was to be expected, but more vibrant than on Ink Gallery 3 screens, at least without the Frontlight. Let's also check out a few comic book pages to get a better sense of what we're dealing with here. Just turning a couple of pages, I can tell that yellow is especially prominent, maybe even a bit too much. Shades of red and blue are also nice, but green on the other hand seems like a weak spot, which was the case with the first Gallery 3 device I mentioned as well. But even though I'm a bit nitpicky here, this is actually looking quite good. And one thing that immediately stands out is the lack of ghosting. Remarkable has implemented a well and comparatively quick refresh that essentially completely eliminates ghosting in PDFs, at least I can't see any right now. The screen flickers a couple of times to render all colors, but that's quick enough to not be too distracting if you're willing to compromise a bit. Definitely much better than on the first Gallery 3 screen I've used. Ghosting is generally a pretty interesting topic on the Remarkable Paper Pro, because when we look at notepads and scroll up and down a bit, we can see that ghosting has this yellow tint and then slowly fades out without the typical flickering of the screen. I'll check this out in more detail in the full review. One thing you will notice when holding the tablet close enough is how grainy the colors are rendered. You can essentially see the colored ink dots when looking closely. This most likely has to do with the resolution of just 229 ppi instead of 300 ppi on the Big Migueli, where that effect is less obvious. But the render mode Remarkable is using here probably also plays a role. I already mentioned the Frontlight, so let's quickly look at it as well before coming to an end. It's adjustable in 5 steps, which I can tell right now aren't enough for granular adjustments. There's a pretty obvious brightness reduction from level 5 to level 4 that could definitely be smoother, while I actually like how the light slightly shines through the edges of the bezel and gives the screen this soft glowing look. There's also a noticeable light bleed on the outer edges of the bezel, and that doesn't look as nice. Uniformity of the Frontlight also seems to be one of the weak spots of the device, with a noticeable color gradient from top to bottom, but I'll have to check that out in more detail for the full review. Okay, so that's it for the unboxing and first impressions. Overall, I really like the build quality and haptics, and the colors look nice and seem to work well. However, after this first couple of minutes, I'm not so sure about the writing experience despite the impressively low latency, and the Frontlight could definitely be improved. I'll be posting a full review soon, where I'll take a close look at the software and other things I haven't mentioned yet as well. I also have a few device comparisons lined up, so be sure to like and subscribe to not miss those. And let me know in the comments what you'd like me to cover in more detail in the full review, or anything you feel is missing from other reviews. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.